Hello, teacher. We are Valentina, Paula, and Pia, and today we're presenting task 2. Our presentation is divided in 3 sections which are school context, identified approach, and teacher role. Our analysis is based on the observation of an English class in Liceo de Niñas Paula Jara Quemada in Recoleta. Recoleta is a commune which its main focus is to strengthen the abilities of productive skills, which are writing and speaking. It is important to highlight that Recoleta has a different program compared to the other communes in Santiago. And also in this school, English classes are divided into 3 groups, which are Taller de Inglés, Inglés, and Inglés Selectivo, which is from students from 11th and 12th grade. This school has a wide variety of contexts. These are socioeconomic, cultural, and sexual diversity. As many students come from different countries, they have different levels of English, since different countries in Latin America has different policies according to foreign language. We observed a class on Thursday, May 31, in 9th grade. In this class, there are 32 students, but that day, specifically, only 11 students came on time, and the rest of them came late as usual. The age range in this class is among 13 and 16 years old. This class aimed to reinforce the reading skill for the last evaluation of the semester, and the activity that they have to do was reading a short story about a vampire, and they have to look for key concepts in order to answer questions about the story.
Based on the previous information, we identified that the approach used by the teacher is grammar translation, which is basically about analyzing grammar rules by translating sentences and texts. As Stern points out, the first language is maintained as the reference system in the acquisition of the second language. The main characteristics of this approach are the following ones. The first one is related to translation. Much of the lesson is devoted to translating sentences into and out of the target language. Most of the class, the teacher uses the mother tongue to explain or make relations between L1 and L2 in order to make the content meaningful and easier to understand. In this case, the teacher read the text in English and asked to the students to translate it to Spanish. This situation usually happens as a strategy in social risk schools where the students do not have a certain level of English that allow them to understand the English classes. On the other hand, in private schools, the students are more exposed to the English since they are very young, so they can understand it easier and they can fulfill the objectives set by the course.
The second one is related with vocabulary, which is selected based only on the text, the reading text that the student use. The words are taught through word list, in which students have to translate to Spanish, and also students are expected to memorize them. As an example, the materials that are used in class are a reading comprehension worksheet, verb list, and keywords that related to the current topics that the students have seen in class. To use them in further evaluation to complete sentences, dictate, but they don't use them in real context. The third one that we choose is related to the main characteristics of this approach. And even though in Recoleta the curricular program promotes or is focused on productive skills, which are speaking and writing, the reality inside classroom is different because the main focus is in writing and reading. So the use of oral language is almost null.
Learning a foreign language for students means an exciting experience. Due to the classes are just focused on memorizing a list of unusable vocabulary and grammar rules. Also, the goal is unrealistic because it's expected that students produce perfect translations. A clear example of this issue is the endless classes where students have to memorize and repeat tenses structures, verb lists, and translate reading comprehension worksheets. Therefore, the students do not feel attracted by the course. Studying for the tests is something boring since they just have to memorize and do not have a real understanding of the language. Even though we are analyzing one specific class, this issue it has been repeated among different classes and courses. So the students are frustrated and they do not feel interested in learning English.
Well, as Richard asserts, traditional approaches have persisted longer in most developing parts of the world than the more economically developed ones, due to the slower development of educational systems and language teaching training, cultural perceptions and different ways of change, limited learning resources and finance. This quote explains why the traditional approaches in education lead in contexts that have social risks, as the one that we presented, and also it has been proved that these students are under traditional instruction issues that continue supporting our unfair Chilean context.
Finally, we want to highlight the teacher role and its main characteristic inside classroom according to this theory, or according to this approach. It is also important to mention that we did not find a theory which explains why grammar translate is still practiced, and it has not a literature that support this method. However, it continued practice, maybe due to those situations. The first one is that the limited command of spoken English of language teaching. For instance, one day the teacher was explaining the collocations and he made a mistake, and one of us corrected him, but he was sure about the argument, and he just justified their beliefs about this content. The second one is that this approach gives teachers a sense of control and authority in the classroom. For example, the teachers tries to control the students with constantly repeating "shut up" and avoiding movements or any types of noises inside classroom.
Referring to the teacher role, we could observe the following. First, that the teacher is speaking Spanish, so he does not promote the exposure to the language in the class. According to an interview that we did to the teacher, he argues that the main mistake that a beginner English teacher makes is start to teach in English, owing to students cannot understand it. So he transmits this belief to his students, and the students repeat that they cannot do it. So the the students feel insecure when they have to speak in English. So the teacher the teacher does not motivate the students, and neither transmits confidence to them.
Well, secondly, the teacher doesn't promote autonomy. A clear example of that was in a specific moment of the class, he asked for some materials that he asked to the students that they had to bring, and only 5 students fulfilled this requirement. Of course, the teacher was angry, and he said that he couldn't believe that they didn't bring the material, since he sent a WhatsApp to their parents and to the students as a reminder. So as you can see, there is a huge lack of autonomy issue in this classroom.
And to emphasize the concept of learner autonomy, we apply the term that compose it. And since they are at varying degrees of learners, of learner involvement and teacher commitment, according to Dickinson, the self-instruction alludes to the moment in which students can work alone without the teacher instructions. The second one is self-access learning that has to do with the material that the student works. They could be of self-access or delivered for them, to them. Self-direction refers to the ability and responsibility that the students have to accept their learning process, but not necessarily how the learning process is going to be developed.
Well, as a final reflection, for us it is important to mention that the interaction in the classroom is one of the main techniques to learn the second language properly. Instead, by using the method of memorization, students tend to forget what they learn in the short term, since they do not apply it, and if they do not apply it, they do not internalize it. So the main objective is not being addressed or accomplished. So as Richards points out, efforts to improve the effectiveness of language teaching have often focused on changes in teaching methods. Throughout history, such changes have reflected changes in the goals of language teaching, such as a move toward oral proficiency rather than reading comprehension as the goal of language study. Thank you.